Well, it's an honor to be joining you today from the homelands of the Nuu-chah-nulth people on the unceded lands of the Huipachesset and Sashat on today, National Indigenous Peoples Day. And I'd like to also give a huge shout out to all First Nations, Inuit and Métis people on this important day. Mr. Giroux, on a per capita basis, how much would Canada need to spend in 2022-23 to meet the NATO 2% target?
I haven't done the calculation precisely, but we have $18 billion in additional spending that would be necessary. And considering the Canadian population, that would be close to $500 per capita, if I'm not mistaken. And Chris is not kicking me under the table, so I'm probably approximately right.
Okay, so if Canada were to invest the $18.2 billion shortfall needed to meet the NATO target in 2022-23, would defense spending surpass federal healthcare spending?
I need to look at the healthcare spending, notably the Canada Health Transfer, but I'm not sure if it would be above, but it would certainly, if not above, certainly very close.
It's my understanding it would actually exceed it, the Canada Health Transfer, and we know that our healthcare system is in a state of deep crisis. Too many Canadians don't have a family doctor, suffering because of delayed surgeries or experiencing halfway medicine at overburdened hospitals. Meanwhile, healthcare workers are burning out and some are actually leaving it altogether. Now, this year, province has asked for an immediate increase to the Canada Health Transfer of $28 billion. Unfortunately, this year's budget missed that opportunity to provide a lifeline to our healthcare system. For 2022-23, what percentage of Canada's GDP is the federal government spending on healthcare? Is it at least 2%?
Again, I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I could certainly get back to you with that number.
Do you have a rough idea, like ballpark?
Probably above 2% given the CHT, but if close to 2%, maybe slightly above, ballpark.
Okay, thank you. The 2% NATO target is intended to demonstrate military readiness and political will. If the government were to make significant new defense expenditures, potentially at the expense of other priorities like healthcare, what metrics can track whether Canada is achieving the goal of military readiness?
That's a very difficult question. So the NATO spending target is a spending target. It's not a target or a metric that assesses military readiness. In questions that your colleagues asked prior to yours, they asked what would be a quick way to spend or to reach the 2% target. And Mr. Housefather, who asked that question, he said that would still make sense, but a quick way that would not necessarily make sense would be to increase eligibility for veterans' pensions or significantly increase veterans' pensions, but that would help reaching 2% of GDP on defense, but that would not help in any way for military readiness. So I'm not the best person to assess what's the best metric for military readiness. You need, for that question, you need somebody who's a specialist in military doctrine and military operations. So unfortunately, I cannot answer whether the 2% spending target by NATO is also something that would materially contribute to military readiness. It depends where the spending is directed.
Well, I would have to argue that taking care of our veterans would create better readiness given the labor market shortage we're in and attracting people to the military. So I appreciate your comments. And have you conducted an analysis on what community benefits such as job creation might be expected in Canada, were the government to significantly increase defense spending in the short to medium term to meet the 2% NATO target? And is it possible much of the benefits of such spending would be seen beyond our borders?
So we have not done such a study because we have not made any assumptions as to, so we have not. And to do that, we would need to make certain assumptions as to the mix of spending that would be domestic for example, on military personnel stationed in Canada versus the proportion of military personnel stationed abroad, as well as the purchase of equipment, the proportion that would be produced and manufactured domestically versus the proportion that would be sourced from foreign countries. So we have not done that study, and it would require a series of assumptions which would be questionable in some instances.
The climate crisis is anticipated to be growing, in terms of a source of geopolitical conflict. What percentage of Canada's GDP is the federal government spending on mitigation and adaptation efforts, both here at home and abroad?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it's probably a very small fraction of the amounts that we're talking about today.
Okay, thanks so much.